This is my review of the RVIBrake2 system that I ordered for my towed vehicle recently, and I'll give you my impressions of it and how I install it in my 2002 Pontiac Grand Am. Now, the person that invented the Brake Buddy system sold his company and then signed a non-competitive agreement for 5 years, and then when that agreement expired, they designed the RVIBrake. So the RVIBrake, I suppose, has its heritage in the Brake Buddy system, and since this is a follow-on product, we would hope that it would operate maybe a little better, but who knows. Now, I ordered the RVIBrake with the optional case because it doesn't normally come with a case, and everything pretty much fits inside the case. There's a basic system here. An antenna, an instruction sheet, and a cheat sheet that I made. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Now, the basic setup also includes a breakaway switch that will allow you to have the brakes applied if the car separates from the RV. Another option that is about a $250 or so extra add-on is tire pressure monitoring systems. So this system actually has the capability of measuring the tire pressures in the tires of the towed vehicle as well, which is pretty nice. However, in my RV, I have the capability of doing that as well, so I can see that from the cab. And there's no reason for me to buy an extra set for the RVIBrake system, because actually it ends up being about $100 more for this system than the one for my RV. Now, I can tell you through experience that the RVIBrake system should be installed last, and actually it should be installed after you put the car in the neutral. And actually I made a mistake one time setting this up, and I put $1,200 worth of damage in the brake system of my car. So if you do not set this up correctly, you can damage your vehicle. The way you're supposed to set it up, according to the owner's manual, is first you lay it on the floorboard in front of your front seat and move it forward enough so that you can attach this clevis to the brake pedal, like that. When you're done with that, you're supposed to move this back until it engages. Now, there's a sliding rack in here, and what the sliding rack does, as you slide this to the rear, it catches the next cog, and what that does is that aligns the cylinder correctly. However, there is an issue, and that is if you inadvertently step on the brake, what happens is this will move forward into the next cog, and now your brake is on all the time. And that's what I did. It was raining the day that we had to move. I had tendonitis in my shoulder, so I was in pain, and you know, just everything all added together, and I made a mistake of not putting the car into neutral. And what happened is the cog moved forward and it depressed the brake all the way down, and I ended up damaging the brakes, and I overheated them so bad that they had to replace the drums and the rotors and everything, and even the boots that went over the ball joints. The rubber had gotten hot and it became solid, and the rubber was actually damaged, and they even had to do that. And I'm surprised they didn't mess up the bearings. But $1,200 later, and I came up with a check sheet on my own, and I laminated it on how to set this up. Now, to be fair with the company, they do caution you about doing that in the owner's manual and in one of the videos. However, in the fog of being in pain and rainy and wet and everything else, you know, it's just a mistake that I made. Now, I won't go so far as say that it's a faulty design, but the design could be improved, because there should be no design that will allow you to make such a mistake. Now, my recommendation would be if the RVIBrake people are listening, is to get rid of this rack system, because this rack system will automatically adjust as you move it forward, and if you move it forward unintentionally, it will adjust incorrectly. Instead, put something like this in the end here, so that once you adjust this, tighten this down, and then this cylinder will be forever aligned properly. But as it is now, anytime that you need to put this into park, you have to remove this whole system and lift up and push this cylinder all the way back, and then move it forward again, put it back in here like that, and then slide this back. Now, if you stop at a rest stop, say after driving 4 to 5 hours, and you decide that you need to start the engine because your battery, you need to keep the battery charged, because sometimes, especially with automatic vehicles, the battery may discharge. Well, you can't start the engine unless, in a lot of cars, and including this one, unless you put it in park. So essentially, every time you go to a rest stop, you've got to remove this, put this into park, start the engine, let the engine idle for a while, shut the engine off, put it in neutral, and then reinstall it. If you had this in here, all you have to do is when you push down on the brake, this whole assembly would move forward, and then when you're done pushing on the brake and putting it in neutral or park, whatever you need to do, then you could just slide this back, and this rack system would never become misaligned. So I see that as an issue. So just make sure that when you install one of these, you do the procedure right. I'm going to adjust the exposure so you can see it better. But as you move it forward, you can see how the racking system works, and it won't go back. Well, and this is where the problem is. If you slide the brake forward, it's going to increment that racking system, and then the brake will never go back to where it was, or in other words, you'll start riding the brakes. The only way you can get rid of it is you got to lift it up and push it back. Now again, on the cylinder it says, do not manually depress brake pedal of the towed vehicle after the RVIBrake installation. Make sure the brake lights are not eliminated before travel. Failure to do so may cause brake damage. Well, I know that, and again, it was my fault, but my contention also is, for $1,200, you should design a system where these cannot occur. Again, my solution is to put a thumb screw in here so that once you adjust this, you're not relying on an automatic racking system. You can tighten it down positively to where you want it to be. Okay, to continue on with the installation, there is a little antenna, and this is one of the reasons why I like the RVIBrake over some of the other ones. Is this antenna is an external one, and you insert the antenna in here like so, and then you can there's some double-sided tape here, you can make it permanent, or what they recommend and suggest, and what I've done, is just drooping it over the rearview mirror. And then the next step would be to take the breakaway switch, if you've installed it, and plug it in here, and then finally plug it in. When you plug it in, the first thing that happens is the air compressor pressurizes the system. Now you'll see that you have some blinking LEDs. One LED is for the sensitivity, and you have low, medium, and high. And the other LED on the bottom is for the vehicle type, and there's actually two columns. It'll go down this column, and it'll go down that column. This column is if you have a vacuum brake system. This column is if you have what they call an active system, which means if you have a hybrid, your system will be an active rather than a vacuum system. So in other words, this system will actually work with a hybrid vehicle. So the initial setup is that you set the braking sensitivity to your desired sensitivity, and then you set the vehicle selection up to the type of vehicle that you have. With the vehicle type is to start out with a vehicle a little smaller than what you have. So say you have a small SUV, they recommend setting up on the compact car position and then moving up to the small SUV if the brakes don't catch enough. So in other words, as you go from compact car to small SUV to large SUV to full-size truck, which are the 4 settings here, the brakes will depress harder. Now on the sensitivity, the high sensitivity will brake the towed vehicle 60 to 70% of the time that you put on the brake. In the medium, it takes a bit of a harder stop, and that's 30 to 50% of the time. And then in low sensitivity, has panic stops only, which is less than 5%. Now, the one thing I found out immediately on this, the first time I used it, is that this is actually in an inertia system. So it detects you braking by feeling the deacceleration. So if you come up to a stop sign with your RV, if you drive like an old fogey like I do, and you just kind of lightly put your brakes on and just slowly come to a stop, or if you do engine braking, and come to a stop slowly, this thing probably won't fire off at all. But if you brake hard enough that you can feel yourself going forward, or like, your seatbelt kind of grabs your chest as you kind of lean forward from the inertia, it takes about that amount before this thing will actually brake at all. So, and that's even in the high sensitive position. So I normally put this into the high sensitive position and compact car for my 2002 Grand Am. Now you also notice that the lights are blinking. Well, the reason they blink is because you have to pre-charge or preset this by depressing on the auto positioning 3 times. So we'll do this once, twice, and 3 times. And what this does basically is, on their vacuum system, it purges any remaining vacuum left in the master cylinder so that you have a consistent amount of brake being applied. If you didn't do that, the first couple times you applied the brake would apply a different amount because it would have some residual vacuum left in the master cylinder. Now you notice after doing that 3 times, all of the lights are on solid, which means that now this thing is set and ready to go. The one last thing you want to do is you also want to go back and look at your brake lights on your car to make sure they're off. If this is not adjusted correctly, if this is pushed in to where it's riding the brakes, those lights will be on. And incidentally, that is what happened also, looking back on it, when I put the damage in the car, I seen the brake lights on. But it was raining, and I wasn't feeling well, and because it was raining, I had the headlights on the RV, so I misinterpreted the taillights as the taillights rather than the brake lights. And of course, the only way you know is if you depress the brake and turn it on and off and seeing that the light's getting brighter and less bright. So, just as a big caution, I would, at very minimum, come up with a setup checklist, which is what I've done here. And this is, and because we don't, I only tow this thing maybe half a dozen times a year, so I kind of forget from time to time how to set everything up. So I come up with this checklist, and this checklist is not only for the braking system, but also on how to set up the tow bar and everything else, and then double check on all that stuff, because the tow bar has some unique things you got to do as well. So I just put everything, instead of having 3 manuals I have to look through each time I tow, I just have one little cheat sheet that I look through everything. So I highly recommend doing that as well. Another idea that I came up with, and possibly if the RVI people are listening to this, they could incorporate this as well. You could connect to the taillights in here, and when the taillights are on, you could sense that voltage. And if the RVIBrake system main box had a way to connect the taillights to that, it could send you a warning if the taillights are on, which means the thing is not adjusted right, and potentially you're going to do $1,200 damage in your vehicle. I mean, the potential for damage is significant enough that I feel that the RVI brake system could be improved. And not only there's this option, but you could also put a micro switch, I suppose, under the brake pedal so that you can tell if the brake pedal is being pushed in or not. So either of those two options, I would highly recommend the RVI brake company incorporate maybe a fail-safe indicator such as that into their system, so nobody else has to put $1,200 in your vehicle like I did. Okay, now there's also a portion of this system that is in the cab of the RV, and we'll go look at that next. And here's the RVIBrake remote, and it's kind of an unusual attachment. It just has an accessory outlet, and I didn't have any place to put it that was sufficient. So what I did is, on the Ford E series chassis, this either comes as 4 upfitter switches or as basically a coin holder. And what I did is this just had a coin holder, so I just got a little aluminum plate made for this spot, and I put a accessory outlet here, a USB port here, and a voltmeter here. And these two, I just didn't have anything else to put in there, so I just kind of filled it with them. And then an on-off switch, so if I turn the power on, then I can see the voltage and such. Well, this braking system monitor fits just like that. Now, if I turn the power on, then we have the braking system itself, and I can set the vehicle sensitivity from low, medium, or high, and the vehicle type from all the selections that we've seen before, the compact car, small SUV, large SUV, full-size truck. And also here's a brake test, and when I push that on, it will depress the brake. Now as we're driving down the road, and right now we're not doing that, I'm just recording this, setting in the cab, but you'll see a bar graph across here when it brakes, and the length of the bar graph is correspondent to how hard it's braking, and you'll just have to trust me on that. So basically that's the review of the RVI2 brake system in a nutshell. Overall, I think it works pretty good. However, with the caveat of being able to severely damage your brakes if you don't install it right, just remember that. Plus the fact that it's easy to maladjust it, which hopefully they will fix, but if they don't, you're just going to have to be real careful when you use it. So again, if RVI brake people are listening, just get rid of that racking system. The small convenience of the sliding rack is not worth the potential to damage your vehicle. So get rid of that racking system and put a thumb screw or something in there so that once you adjust it correctly, you can tighten it down and it'll be positive, and there's no way that you're going to damage your brakes. So thanks for watching.